Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Andy Semotiuk, Forbes contributor and immigration attorney. Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be here. Let's go. Let's do this.
Let's do this. And President Donald Trump certainly started his second term off with a bang this week. Within hours of being sworn in, he signed a swath of executive orders, many of which had to do with immigration. You wrote a piece going over the legality of these executive orders as they relate to immigration. So let's start with the one that has perhaps faced the most backlash. And this is changing the definition of birthright citizenship. Can you talk to us about this executive order and the legality behind it?
Sure. Well, the challenge that America faces is that foreigners are bringing pregnant wives into the United States so that they may give birth to children that are thereby U.S. citizens, because the 14th Amendment of the Constitution provides that anybody born in the United States, with some very narrow exceptions related to diplomats and children of diplomats and personnel, army personnel or whatever. But generally speaking, anybody born in the United States is thereby a citizen. So that's called birthright citizenship. And the 14th Amendment of the Constitution provides for that right. And so Trump has tried to essentially abolish that right through an executive order. And the problem is that you can't do it that way. You have to get a constitutional amendment, which requires approval through Congress and also states that are supporting the amendment in order to amend the Constitution.
So how big of an uphill legal battle does this face? Because you're saying the 14th Amendment protects birthright citizenship. So is there any precedent here, and can this executive order make it happen?
Not through executive order. What will happen and what's happening is several of the states, something like 22, have already challenged this proposal, this executive order, through the courts to strike it down, precisely on the grounds that we're talking about. And there's no way the courts are going to support this, because the law is constitutionally there's birthright. So the only way Trump can really implement this thing is to get congressional approval and thereafter states approval. Like, for example, there is the Equal Rights Amendment that related to women's rights, of gender equality and so on, and how hard it's been to try and get approval through Congress and the states in order to implement that, that right. So the uphill battle would be similar in nature for Trump and the MAGA Republicans to get this changed. I think it's I would describe it as a mission impossible, really.
To that point, I just wrote down, this seems legally black and white. So what would be even the point of signing this executive order? What is the point of someone knowing that something faces this big of a legal hurdle, mission impossible, so you say, and still signing that anyway?
Well, that's something we have to ask Trump and his team. But I would say I think that what's going on here is they have this sense that because Trump is the president, he has the capacity to change American life and to implement what he believes to be, proper goals according to the people who follow him. And since a majority voted in his favor, that he has the right to be able to do this. But there's a problem with the Constitution, and the Constitution is the fundamental law of American society. So he has to fight the issue through constitutional change, and the only way to do it, like every time he tries it, he's going to get struck down in the courts until he goes through Congress. I think because it's a constitutional change, there's 2/3 vote required. You got Democrats that are going to block it, and then the states have to approve. So it's just like he would have to mount such a campaign throughout the United States to get such a majority to do it, that among all the issues that he's dealing with, I think it's just not. It may be very popular for the MAGA Republicans and others who may even support that idea, But changing the Constitution is a heck of an effort. It's not sort of overnight, or we change the Constitution.
Let's move on to one surrounding the Humanitarian Parole Program. And this is what a DHS statement said this week. Quote, the Biden-Harris administration abused the Humanitarian Parole Program to indiscriminately allow 1.5 million migrants to enter our country. This was all stopped on day one of the Trump administration. This action will return the Humanitarian Parole Program to its original purpose of looking at migrants on a case-by-case basis. Legally, what legs does the administration have to end this program?
Good questions, Brittany. And here's the deal on this humanitarian parole thing. Every one of those people was indeed investigated or interrogated at a port of entry, questioned before they were allowed into the United States. It's not that they just came in and now they have humanitarian parole. They got the parole, meaning they got permission to enter the United States. Why? It's because they're escaping from countries that are impossible to live in, like Venezuela, or Cuba, or wherever, Haiti, or Haiti. Sorry, I mispronounced it. Haiti, Ukraine, for example. So they came to the border. They dealt with a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer, and they persuaded that officer that they merit being granted permission to enter the United States. It's not more than that. It's just to legally enter the United States, to be in the United States. And they've been given what's called humanitarian parole because the alternative is impossible to deal with. And the idea is that these people are temporarily allowed in the United States until things change back home and they're able to return back home. Now, in some cases, they may not be able to return back home. Like, take the example of Ukraine, for example. There's a war going on in Ukraine. Russia's invading Ukraine, so you can't send. I think there were something like 200,000 that were allowed in, or up to 300,000. Such individuals at this moment are unable to return home. So you have to let them in. Now, as far as the legality of it is concerned, well, first of all, if you've been given the right to come, the way you abolish that right is there's an administrative procedure that you have to follow. You don't just declare one day, okay, your rights are finished, go home. You have to notify the people, given time, to change the law, you have to, or the rule, you have to give notice, and you have to allow people time to comment on the rule before you make a change. So there's an administrative flaw in what Trump has done. And the other thing is there's a reliance interest that's involved. That is to say that people who came have been cultivated to rely on the commitment of the government. The government has said, okay, in your case, we understand why we should allow you to be here. So we're allowing you in. So they're uprooting that reliance interest, and that's why it's going to be tough for them to maintain that executive order.
And when you were writing about this in your Forbes piece, you wrote that critics could argue it violates the Fifth Amendment, ending this. Can you expand on that?
Well, the deal there is if it's discriminatory, if they consider that it's discriminatory, in other words, certain people are not being treated equally with other people, race, for example, as a consideration. For example, the people from Haiti, maybe the government's not treating them equally with people from other parts of the world. In that case, it could be struck down based on the sort of racial implication involved.
I want to talk about the first-term Trump era Remain in Mexico policy. That is returning, according to his executive order. Is that going to be easy to implement?
No, and thanks for asking that question as well. In the asylum world, in the law of asylum, there's this idea that a country like the United States, who signed all the international treaties dealing with asylum, owes a duty to the people claiming asylum to do them no harm and to not return them or deny them entry if it means sending them into a country where they may be harmed or not treated properly. And the big issue about returning these people to Mexico is, how are they being treated in Mexico when they are returned? Like, are they safe? Are these kids who are returned, for example, and these women who are returned, are they safe? Or are they subject to potential, abuse on the part of people out there who are, preying on these guys, money-wise, or like physically or emotionally, using coercion, etc. And the answer is, they're not that safe. It's not like you're just turning them back and they're staying in, like in the Holiday Inn in Mexico. No, no, no. These people are vulnerable, and there are, people in the dark world that are preying on them, and this is an excellent opportunity for them to, take the whatever money, cash they have, institute, take young kids into human bondage, for example. Things of this nature are the threats that are out there. So it's nice to say, well, they don't have rights to come to the United States, so let's let them wait in Mexico. But the question is, well, wait how? What's the status of those people while they're waiting? And international law requires, if they sign the agreements, international law, about asylum, what's asylum about? It's someone who has a well-founded fear of persecution back home, who's escaping that persecution and is seeking to come to the United States based on one of the established grounds, like race, religion, political opinion, gender, threats to one of those areas of their life. And, this is not Mickey Mouse. These are serious life issues. These people are escaping from people who are persecuting them. And so that's why they're at the border. It's not like they're just here, just to enjoy a trip to the United States to go to Disneyland. So that's the deal there.
And President Trump, in his inaugural address, also said that he wanted to declare a national emergency at the southern border. First of all, logistically, what exactly does that mean? And legally, what does that look like?
Okay, so declaring a national emergency. Look, what we have in a situation like this, where President Trump sits down and signs presidential declarations, it looks like he's solving all these problems, that all we needed all this time was to sign a declaration and the problem will go away. But it's not like that. It's like he's pushing buttons that don't operate anything. It looks good that he's pushing the buttons, but the buttons don't work. It's a similar, like an analogy. That's what's happening here. So this business of, setting up, declaring a national emergency sounds great, but a national emergency what? To seal the border. So what are they going to do? They're sending border patrol people there. Okay, that's good. You're going to try and get some control over the border. But as I've argued in other articles that I've written for Forbes, to draw an analogy, that our criminal justice system does not catch every criminal is no reason for criticizing or abolishing the criminal justice system. Similarly, that our border does not stop every person who's trying to come across, legally or illegally, is no argument for canceling or criticizing what we've got. We need to buttress it and do the best job we can. But if perfection is what you're after, even if we spend all the resources America has on trying to seal the border, the sad reality is there will always be someone who will crawl under, crawl around, crawl over, sneak in, fly in, or whatever. We will always have people who are undocumented and coming to the United States. That doesn't mean we can't do better or we can't do really well or excellent. It's just a matter of being practical in terms of what the problem is. And the practical definition of the problem is to do our best. And There's a problem with sealing the border, putting up a wall, and so on. And the problem is, first of all, we tried it before, and the court struck it down when Trump was first elected in the first round. And there's a separation of powers problem. The money to seal the border and build a wall is controlled by Congress. And as much as President Trump would like to, direct, okay, we're doing this, this, and this, he's not a dictator. This is not like a totalitarian state where he can just decide what to do and then everybody steps in line. He's got to deal with Congress, and he's got to deal with the states and what they say. And so the result is, again, he's going to have trouble with that area.
I want to switch and pivot a bit to one that's a little different than the past four, and it's designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. A, how can he do this? And B, diplomatically speaking, what is this going to do with our relationship to Mexico?
Great questions again. First of all, what authority does he have? The area of designating someone as a terrorist organization usually involves the State Department and an analysis of what's going on and a preparation of a reason or a reasoned argument for why you're designating these people as terrorist organizations. I'm not saying that they're not terrorist organizations. All I'm saying is the Constitution envisions that such a declaration would involve the State Department coming up with some sort of a ruling on this, and there's the issue of due process involved. It's not the decision so much as the process that was used to decide it that is the challenging aspect of it. Again, it's one of these, well, he's got a button, he's going to push the button, but does the button do anything kind of a scenario? If he did it right, maybe it would work. Maybe we could get something going on that front. But there are issues related to how he's doing it, and also there may be people who are involved, U.S. citizens who may be involved in one way or another with this whole process of these people that are doing this thing, who may raise complaints or challenge what he's doing based on the way he's doing it. So it's iffy.
It's really interesting hearing your perspective as an immigration attorney. You're essentially saying some of these actions are mission impossible. Others are more like a show button that doesn't really work anywhere else. This is all just to show, hey, I'm tough on the border, but nothing is really getting done here. So from your perspective as an immigration attorney, what do these executive orders, these actions, this tough rhetoric surrounding the border and immigration indicate what Trump's going to do about immigration and his policy in his second term?
Well, I would say this. I would expect a rough ride going forward. I don't think we're dealing with the immigration issues the way that we should in order to solve the issues. It's a fact of life that we can't live our lives in isolation, that we have to live with one another. We may not like each other. We may have arguments with each other. But if you want progress in life, you have to deal with other people. And in this case, this is a congressional matter. It's a matter of getting these rulings through Congress. Now, he's got control of Congress. The MAGA Republicans have got control of both houses. So it's not like it's impossible to try and run some of these things through the Congress. But even in Congress, and even though he's got his own people there, not everybody's in agreement with what he's trying to do. But what is needed is agreement between Republicans and Democrats at comprehensive immigration reform. It's been talked about, it's been tried, but just we haven't been able to get it over the finish line. But they're trying. In Congress, I read even just today that there are groups of even Democrats and Republicans trying to work something out and get something going in terms of a joint effort, a comprehensive immigration program that people can get behind and push through Congress and get some of these shortcomings solved in a way that makes sense, with the resources and the power of the U.S. government behind them. So who knows? Maybe somehow, if Trump is not able to get his measures through, maybe they'll at least push Congress to come up with some sort of a bipartisan package that might get through Congress and indeed solve some of these big issues.
I think if this week it shows us anything, it's that there's going to be a lot of talk on the border, on immigration, a lot of action surrounding these topics. And as we see that continue to play out in the next 4 years, I hope you join me and we can have plenty of conversations breaking down the legality behind it. Andy, thank you so much for your time today.
Brittany, it was a pleasure to deal with you and to talk to you. Thanks for having me on the program.